Buddy, this is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm here with Barbara Peters to talk with Alex DeMille, whose new book, The Tin Men, is number 7 on a certain bestseller list. Congratulations, Alex. And
Thank you.
we are, yeah, we're sold out of the book, but we are getting more. We sent another batch to Alex to sign. So if you'd like one, I'll put a link in the comments field. And if you have any questions for Alex, go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will summon me back on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Let me urge you, if you have not ordered the book, to do it fairly quickly because our reorder is filling up fast, and I can't keep asking Alex, except more. It's not easy to get cartons at home and sign them and send them off. So we're on our last shipment. Anyway, congratulations. That's marvelous. I'm sure your dad, wherever he is really proud of the fact that you are number 7 in it's the combined list, right? The Ian
The combined
hardcover.
list, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting to see the relationship between ebooks and hardcover and how it's tilting more towards the ebook, at least our book has been, but it's interesting to see how the business is changing depending on the genre.
Well, oftentimes it's equal, and then actually the ebook tends to fall fast. If you look,
Hmm.
a week or two later, the hardcover list will stay more stable often than the other list.
Right.
So it's actually audiobooks that and they don't count those in. So there's a very large swath of sales that is audiobooks that nobody's paying any attention to. So that again
That's
would
right. Yeah.
impact the list. But anyway, making the list at all for a thriller right now is particularly difficult. As Alex said, you really need to have dragons or something to kind of lift it, right? So can you show
Yeah.
us?
I mean, it's funny. I mean, oh yeah, here's the book.
Right, show us the book. There we are. See, it's a real book.
Here's the book. It's a real book. I'm holding it in my hands. I like this cover. This is a bit of a the first two in the series, The Deserter and Bloodlines, kind of had similar covers to the other Simon Schuster books my father did, Cuban Affair and The Maze. We kind of had the idea to go back to it's almost like a little bit of a throwback retro looking cover. It kind of evokes some of his '90s books. We kind of did that on purpose, and I thought it was fun.
I think it's great.
So,
And
and you'll see if you look closer, the dog tags have a binary code on them, which actually spells something if you put them into a
it
into
does.
a decoder. So I thought that was
Ah, you
fun
want
too.
to you
Yeah.
are you going to reveal what it does, or we're going to let people work it out for themselves?
Oh, we'll let people work it out. It's not. I mean, it's just it's each sequence stands for one letter, so it's a fun thing to find yourself.
Of course it was. So Alex, in his own right, is a filmmaker, and more recently a novelist. His father, Nelson, was a big part of our bookstore for a long time. When we opened our second store, very short-lived in Phoenix because the landlord forgot to get permits and the city eventually shut down the complex, he came to open it for us. And we did lots of events with Nelson. I think the last one we did, Taylor Moore, his big fan, flew in from Texas, an author, to talk to your dad. Um, and we did some Zoom events, you and Nelson and I. Was it both books or was it one book?
Mhm.
When
I
we,
think we definitely remember doing Bloodlines. I think we did both.
I think we did
I
too.
think it was both.
So, but
Yeah.
Nelson died quite suddenly, and here we are with him having done part of the Tin Men, and then Alex finishing it, but he'd already had plenty of practice writing the first two, which were called, where am I here? The Deserter and Bloodlines, and introduce new characters. Now, Alex, you've been doing some talks on Instagram, and one of the things I thought was interesting was that you pointed out that Nelson's John Corey was, I don't, how would you describe John Corey? Why am I putting words in your mouth? You should tell us.
I think the word I used on Instagram was pig, but affectionately
Right.
called him a pig, which my father would do the same. He was a lovable pig, and he got the job done, and his heart was in the right place. He was fighting for justice, but also had a kind of he was a rogue. I would say that.
Right. And so you decided in the characters that you were going to write a pair that they would be what, more straightforward? I mean, no dragons, but they weren't on the other hand going to be rounders. I always like that word rounders to describe. I think it's kind of British, but it means, slightly roguish or, not totally upright or whatever and maybe that's it, not totally upright, thus rounder.
Um, I don't, I don't want them to come off like they were squares because it was specifically a male-female team of investigators. They had to, of course, we want to some. It was a balance between the realities.
Alex is having trouble with his
Also young, to late mid to late 30s, depending on the book. So yeah, we back.
Right, Alex, we're having trouble. Once again, you're frozen. Do you want to see if you can go off and come back in again? Let's see what happens. Meantime, there he goes. Meantime, I will say that Nelson's book, The Charm School, was what we called our airplane book back in the days when people used to run into the bookstore on their way to Sky Harbor and ask us for an airplane read. We kept The Charm School on the counter and absolutely sold tons of
Okay,
them. You're back,
I'm
right?
back. Does this
Okay.
work? Okay. I'm not sure what's going on. Just the way the wind is blowing, the Wi-Fi signal. So I was saying the characters are, they're in mid to late 30s, male, female, investigative team. So there's a tension between needing to keep things professional and maybe there's some interest from one or of the other or both, depending on the book and on the moment. So it was a different dynamic than the solo hero John Corey books, but at the same time, Scott Brodie is I think some sort of successor, spiritual successor.
To John Curry, right? Right. So I was saying in
Yeah,
your brief absence that the Charm School was what we called our airplane book, which was it was such a good thriller that we could sell it to absolutely anybody who's zipped into the store on their way to the airport and wanted a great read. And that went on for years until the Cold War really became so
right.
remote that we then switched over to Orphan X by Greg Hurwitz, which is another, action book that people would enjoy on the plane. But I think we sold at least a couple thousand copies of the Charm School in paperback to people. And I have
Oh,
an autographed copy that your father did for me, which I treasure, which is great. So when you decide, or how did it come to happen that you decided to write together? Was Nelson idea, your idea, it just happened?
it was his idea. So he's long been a pretty steady cadence of a book every 2 years. And at some point, the industry became accustomed to a book every year. That just wasn't his thing. But Simon and Schuster thought we should bring a co-author in and have a co-author book every other year and a solo Nelson DeMille book every other year. So they actually hired a totally different writer for The Deserter, and they wrote a whole. I mean, this other writer wrote a whole book, and this writer, the collaboration just didn't work, and the book didn't work. They involved in doing any of the writing. Can you hear me still? Because you froze up a little bit.
You do kind of keep freezing, but
Yeah.
maybe that's the best you can do.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry. Okay. What I'm gonna do? I'm gonna relocate very
okay,
quickly. Sorry. I think I'll see
yeah.
if this works out
All
better.
right.
I'll be back.
I think that's a good idea. Right. So back again. Um, so Nelson, was it was really a lot of fun, and he had so many writers, fellow writers who really admired him, and it was always fun to talk about him. He wrote 24 novels. I'm not sure in that 24 if it includes these two books. Um, with the first two books that he and Alex co-authored together. And when Alex comes back, one of the reasons that a different co-author didn't work out was that Nelson's process was uniquely Nelson. And I think only Alex could actually have written a book with his dad, given the way the whole thing was structured. So I'll ask him about that when he returns. Um, right, there you are.
Okay. All right. We're gonna try a new location. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No, it happens. So
Yeah.
I was saying in your absence that your dad had a writing process that was if not unique to him, certainly not one that lent itself easily to collaboration. So I can see why it would have been tough for anybody but you to actually write a book with him.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you did a very interesting post today about it with visuals. So why don't you kind of briefly touch on how your dad wrote and how you two wrote together? People are always interested in collaborations. How do they actually work?
Yeah, he'd only done one collaboration before. And he had a joke he liked to say that he had a sign in his office that said collaborators will be shot. That was, that was his zinger. He did one collaboration, Mayday, with his friend Thomas Block. And I think the book turned out well, but it was not a pleasant experience. And for that book, they did they each wrote every other chapter, which kind of sounds insane to me. I don't know how somebody could write a book like that. What we did was we kind of established the premise together, the pitch and the proposal that we sent to the publisher, and then I took that and went off on my own and wrote um, chapters, first drafts of chapters, and every once in a while I'd send him a batch, and I'd send them to his assistant. His assistant would print them out, put them on his desk. He would sharpen his number one pencil, number one, not number two, because number one is softer glide. That's what he would say. And he would get to work, and he would do all of the kind of stuff you'd now see in Microsoft Word, like track changes, would all just be with pencil markings, crossing things out, replacing this word, moving this paragraph here and that one there. Sometimes if he had something he wanted to add, he would just write insert, and then I would get like a one or two legal pages of his writing that was supposed to go into the middle of whatever I had. And he would his assistant would scan them and email them back to me. So I have all these PDF kind of artifacts of our collaboration, which was pretty fun. But I'd get notes back on a chapter, and I would kind of know immediately how much work I had ahead of me when I opened it up and saw how much just scribble was all over it. But that so really, I mean, these three books all were written under three different circumstances, so there wasn't one process. Probably the smoothest process was the middle book, Bloodlines, because I kind of had figured out what I was doing, and he was writing the maze at the same time. So he had his own solo. This is what the publisher wanted. This was it was all working the way they had planned, where he was working on a solo book, I was working on the co-author, and then every once in a while. And there was a time actually because we were running that during the pandemic, so I think I worked on my own for like 5 months, and I sent him 5 months worth of work, which was a little nerve wracking. But then he dug into it, and every once in a while we would kind of pause the book and say, okay, where is this going? Especially before something that would take a lot of time, like for instance the third act, the climax. Well, we would always make sure to kind of talk that out first because I had my ideas, he had his, but for the deserter especially, we kind of like worked out. I was because that was the first book I did with him. I was having a little bit of challenge of how to kind of wrap this up in a successful climax. He had an idea. I was arrogant enough to be skeptical of his idea, and he said, "Try it. Don't knock it till you try it and see if it works." And of course, he was right. I did what he was suggesting, and it totally worked. So we were able to bounce off each other face to face when we could. If not, it was over the phone, and it was this kind of this nice running dialogue. What if this? What if that? Or I'd come to him with a problem. I'd say I'm stuck here. He used to say there's no such thing as writer's block, which I think is obnoxious to anybody who's ever had writer's block. But it's simply problem solving. It's a mystery, and generally speaking, we would know what the solution to the mystery is, but the kind of path to get there was needed to not be a straight line, and sometimes you're throwing in red herrings or you're throwing things in the path of the hero, and sometimes the obstacles are so difficult that then you're like, how am I getting them out of this? So it was kind of fun to have that back and forth with him. and it worked.
So do you, I'm trying to, how can I put this? Nelson had a distinctive voice, I
Mhm.
mean, it was clear when you were reading John Corey anyway, he had a John Corey voice. So when you were writing together, do you think that you achieved a sort of third voice? I mean, it was not entirely Nelson,
I think I'd like to think so, because I knew I wasn't trying to make I wasn't trying to ape his voice, nor was I trying to make something totally new, because this was a Nelson DeMille book. He had established fans. We wanted to serve that and live up to that. But I wasn't trying to come out and prove something. Look how different I can be. But at the same time, I'm a different person. So I had to write what felt true and real to myself. And I think for me, some of it was just the cadence, because his books, even our books were third person, all the Corey books were first person, but regardless, either way, there's something kind of conversational about them, which is you kind of feel like you're riding along with a kind of a clever, very intelligent, funny, person who's kind of telling you what's going on, and kind of striking the balance between getting a voice that was sort of casual but not too casual. um was it took some time with the Deserter, but I think we landed on it. That book being set in Venezuela, there's lots of pretty bleak stuff in that book for people who haven't read it. And I remember working on it and thinking, what the hell is funny about this? Like nothing, but there must be because um, I just my dad just had this gift for this kind of gallows humor, and seeing not never punching down and never kind of mocking people who are suffering, but kind of finding the ridiculousness in even the worst scenarios. And that book in particular, I feel like I learned a lot from him and how to do that. So by the time we came to Bloodlines, I felt a little bit more self-possessed with that side of the quality of his writing. So yeah, but it really was a kind of a meld between his voice and some sort of new quasi Nelson DeMille voice that I was working on, working in this very specific genre with a specific kind of hero, if that makes sense.
well, I think one could fairly say that Nelson was not pretentious. His
No.
writing was not pretentious. He wasn't trying to be, a literary star. He was a storyteller. I
Mhm.
think he was a very fine writer. I'm not in any way suggesting that the writing, wasn't excellent, but, he was in service of the story. So if you are going to continue with this series, do you think that, on your own now, the voice will be easy for you to do?
Well, I think honestly, people can judge from the Tin Men because I wrote most of that book
Right?
by myself due to circumstances, and it seems that most people can't tell, or at least the people that like it think he wrote it, and maybe people who don't like it assume I wrote it. I don't. I don't know. That tends to be how it goes, but it's been getting a very strong response. I mean, almost across the board. Definitely, every professional review has been very, very positive. 90% of reader reviews have been very positive, so I feel happy about that. I do think at some level, I'm not going to say I inherited his voice, but I had his voice in my head, and when he passed away, that voice became louder, maybe by necessity. I didn't have him there, so I kind of imagined he became an imagined reader, and it absolutely changed once he did his reading of the manuscript inside of my own head. It absolutely changed um, what I did. It dictated decisions that I made. So it was a very intense but also kind of beautiful way to grieve. Because that what ended up happening is I wrote the book. I wrote a big portion of the book in the really 3 months after he died.
Did you? Wow, good for you.
Yeah,
It isn't
yeah.
interesting, but I'm sure that it kept your dad closer to you as a result of doing the work. He would be
It,
bound to.
it did, because I think, I mean, I fortunately, my first time losing a parent, I don't know what's kind of the average normal experience, or there's no average experience, but I don't know how people normally grieve. But I imagine you're thinking about the person a lot, and you're kind of playing back memories you have with the person, and maybe you're also imagining how things would be with them now if they were still there, when new experiences happen. And I was kind of doing all that in this condensed kind of insane process. As I'm working on this story that he and I came up with together. We did the proposal together. Then he got sick, and I started writing. And as well as long as he could, he was reading chapters and weighing in. But he was a perfectionist, and he would not even look at the pages unless he was having a good day. And a good day meant he was always sharp. He was always sharp of mind. A good day meant he wasn't you know taken so far down from physical fatigue from from the chemo.
Sure.
Um, and
Well,
eventually he just
in a way, it was like you were having long conversations with him once he was gone.
yeah,
I mean, so
yeah,
that is a different way to grieve. And it's wonderful that you had the experience of writing two books before, so that it wasn't it was easier. You already had, a lot of it in place. I
yeah,
often wonder, when there's the famous publisher story about, you know, Michael Crichton left an unpublished manuscript or something, and somebody stepped in to finish it or whatever. And I'm always slightly skeptical about that. Whether in fact there were maybe like 8 words on the page, or here was the title.
yes, right,
Um, but I mean, in your case, not only did you write two full books with Nelson, but you had, a running start on this one. So it's almost like he prepared you for, you know, it's
yeah. I
great.
absolutely could not have done this without the prior two books. And the irony, kind of sad irony of it, is that this book, more than the other two, leans into the American Army, and it's about the American Army.
Right.
And I had really leaned on him and his military experience for a lot of this, and I would kind of BS some things in my imagination, knowing that if this did ring true to an actual veteran, he would catch them and flag them. Um, and I think the experience of those two books gave me confidence that I could do it without that. And also, I have friends. I had a friend who was a former officer in the Marine Corps. I had her read the book, and a couple other guys I know who I talked to. So, I felt like I had enough uh, of a foundation to do this.
So the book, we'll finally get to talk about the book now that
Mhm.
we've done all these other things. The book actually takes place in Death Valley on an army base, and I think it should scare all of us in the sense of, we're talking about robotics and AI so much today, and this book leans very heavily into that. So tell us about the book, Nelson. Sorry, Alex. Lord, look at me. I've already followed.
Um, so the Tin Men, excuse me, the Tin Men is the third adventure with Scott Brodie and Maggie Taylor, or male-female Army CID teams. They're essentially Army detectives, and they are dispatched by their commanding officer, who says there's been a death at this remote Army installation called Camp Hayden. It's located in the Mojave Desert. A scientist had his skull crushed by a lethal autonomous weapon, to which Brodie says, "Do you mean that you're talking about a killer robot?" And he says, "We don't use that word, but you need to go there." And he also says, "I don't know. They won't tell me. They don't. I don't know what they're doing, but you have to go there. And once you get there, you have to turn in your cell phones. Any landline phone calls you make are going to be tapped by defense intelligence. Essentially, you're on your own, and nothing goes. Once you get there, no one comes in or out." So I kind of set it up as a closed circle murder mystery. And we meet the cast of characters, and it's clear somebody here knows more than they're saying. It becomes a question of, even, is this a homicide? Was this intentional sabotage? Was this incompetence, or was this some sort of singularity with these machines? The AI and these machines kind of making their own decisions. But when they get there, what they find is a platoon of human army rangers who are running war games with these things, these lethal autonomous weapons that the rangers nickname the Tin Men. Um, and what we see is this ranger platoon kind of ravaged by the process of having to fight these machines and kind of lose over and over again. The book explores kind of abuse of performance enhancing drugs among elite soldiers, the isolation. It's almost as though they're overseas in combat, even though they're training, because they're not allowed to leave. So it's a kind of high pressure, intense environment with this this murder mystery that they have to unravel, and things go awry. Let's say that.
Structurally, it's quite interesting because, I mean, normally thrillers are kind of an open road thing. There's a instigating incident, and then things roll forward towards a conclusion and often covers a lot of distance. I mean,
Mhm.
lots of thrillers go to multiple locations and all kinds of things happen. But you actually set this one up kind of like Agatha Christie.
That's right. Yeah.
Camp Hayden replaces, the stately manor. And whatever's happened can only have happened with the people enclosed in this space. It's not like, some guy drove over the hill in a Humvee and, you know, whatever. So I found that interesting. I think maybe that's what's tickled reviewers too, is that it's an unusual structure for a thriller, but you really make it work.
Thanks. Yeah, I really liked that aspect of it because the last one, I mean, it was set just in Berlin, but you go all over the city, and it is more of
Mhm.
that thriller structure of you go to A to B to C, and you have no idea where Z will be, regardless, let alone what's going to happen. And I thought giving myself these kind of parameters and these limitations of setting, it would allow to kind of go deeper into other things and really get into the cast of characters and the kind of claustrophobia, the irony of also feeling this claustrophobia inside of this kind of vast natural space, all the while having these terrifying machines on base that are now all shut down because one of them, did something horrible. But are they really shut down? Who has the power to turn them back on? And why? And so it's almost like this entire fleet of loaded weapons that are just kind of waiting to go off.
Well, I mean, reasonably speaking, you do have to keep it enclosed. I mean, it's a, kind of a secret project. But you couldn't turn these giant robots loose on a landscape and have them, running all over a city or all over
Right,
a country. So I think your choice of antagonist, so to speak, at least the non-human antagonist, pretty much demands that you keep them in check.
right. Yeah.
Of course, I think that thrillers really depend more on the antagonist than they do on the protagonist. I mean, if you
Mhm.
can't come up with a great villain, oftentimes, the thriller just it's too weak. There's
Yeah.
not enough whatever. So you created a group of them, but behind that is a really interesting question, which is, are these soldiers acting on their own? Have they somehow, progressed to whatever the thing, I'm trying to remember what the word is, what there's a fusion.
Oh, the self-awareness or
Yeah,
singularity,
no,
or
the
yeah,
singularity. That was
yeah.
it. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. And whether they've actually progressed to the singularity or is there a human agent behind all of this? I mean, it has to be one or the other. Either the robot acted on its own with some kind
Right,
of personal intelligence, or somebody managed to program or control the robot. And then the
right,
question is, if that's true, why this guy? I mean, why did they kill the guy that's dead?
right. And there's a line in that their commanding officer says to them towards the beginning of, you know, um, they're kind of incredulous that this would even be allowed to happen. He says, like, everybody on this base has seen all the same science fiction movies you have, and they all know the very obvious dangers. I wanted to set it up because we all know if you create these things, then it's almost expected that they're going to, in the world of fiction and of a thriller, there's something's going to go wrong. But I wanted to really build in that they understood what all the dangers were and made lots of very intelligent choices to limit the danger, and yet something went wrong anyway. So that was a bit of a a challenge I was almost thinking of myself as the chief safety officer at Camp Hayden. What would I do if I was in charge of this? What's take every single last precaution to make sure what actually happens doesn't happen, and yet it happens anyway. And then that becomes this big source of tension.
Excuse me, I swallowed something the wrong way, but
Okay.
you've already established the fact that even the elite soldiers, and they are among the very elite soldiers, human soldiers in this camp, are not able to defeat the robots, and that's one of the problems is their morale is so damaged by the fact that every time they go into a battle exercise or something, they get whopped.
Yeah.
Um, And so that discouragement would be, I mean, why go if you don't have any chance of winning?
Right. It becomes
Step
it's
out
a
on the
version
field
of,
at all. Yeah.
yeah, it's a version of psychological warfare on top of the other kind of warfare. And also we have this idealistic notion that, we are humans, and there's always a way to outsmart the robot. There's always a way to, it's my, my brains over brawn. But what if the brawn is so brawny? And what if the mechanized strength and violence is so great that it doesn't matter how much more clever you are, right? Because we don't set these things up as being these brilliant AI driven things either. But it's almost like what happens when no amount of forethought and no amount of clever human tricks work, and what happens when these things
Exactly.
bash against each other.
It came in a way, it's sort of a mild reflection, but somehow or other, I have fallen into the clutches of some loop that wants me to respond so I can get a shitload of money, one of those phone scam things.
Right.
And it keeps changing numbers. And, so I'd screen the call and it would always be, you've been approved for whatever. And in frustration, I said to my husband, isn't there, any way to block these? So there's a more extreme blocking thing. But I remember saying to him, why don't they just get tired of it, and I'm always blocking them. And he said to me, it's a machine. They don't get
Right.
tired. They can go forever. And it's
Yeah.
true because it's still actually happening. And I thought about that in relation to the soldiers, the robots, they don't ever get tired.
No, they don't get
They're good to
discouraged.
go every
They don't
single
get
time.
bored. Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I get these AI generated marketing pitches all the time.
Yeah.
And what makes them different than human messages is that there's a level of like eagerness to please, and just desperate attempt to be clever. Give you 15 different bullet points about different things. It's almost this like try hard AI, whereas a real person would just have some much more succinct message. It's just interesting to see how this AI has not quite figured out yet how to actually sound real. And they think that anyway, I have the same thought of is there even a person behind this? I mean, there's a name on there, but is it somebody who just auto generates these things, scrapes the data off of Goodreads or Amazon and sends it to every author in existence? It's probably something like that, but it's
It
definitely,
probably is something like that. I mean, I
yeah,
also, because you want some sort of logic behind it. If I get four calls in a row from different out-of-state phone numbers, do they really think? But that's the point. They're not thinking. But
right,
my attitude is, wouldn't they think that, I would become suspicious. But they're not thinking. It's just a machine
right.
programmed to, keep using different phone numbers to keep calling, hoping at some point, I guess, the object at some point is for you to fall into
It,
it. Yeah.
it's a numbers game, I guess. I got a few, like three or four in a row, 5-star reviews on Goodreads, and I looked at them. And the first one, I'm like, oh, that's nice. I read the second one. I'm like, this is a little too like the first one. And it was like these. It was very clearly the series of AI generated 5-star reviews. I was like, why is the robot giving me 5 stars? What's its plan? Like, what is this? What is the tactic here? It was I again, you're subscribing agency to something that's either chaos or just absolutely random, and
Or
I
they're
don't
just
know.
doing it because they can. I mean, whoever's programming, Rob was, my husband is much more into this whole world than I am, points out to me that a lot of this is just because they can. There is
Yeah.
no particular motive, financial or whatever. It's just, you know, something people can do. I think we unleashed a monster with the internet in so many ways. I mean, it's incredibly useful. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be talking to you at the moment. Um, but the opportunities to pervert it and, divide people with it and harass people with it, as well as praise people with it, are extraordinary. But the danger is the anonymity. If people
Hmm.
actually had to sign their name, if they actually had to be accountable for anything that they do, it would be different. But
It began as a tool of social connection, and then it became a tool of alienation. And
yeah,
I was, I came up. I was a teenager when AOL started and all that stuff. And I've seen the gradual kind of corruption of this thing.
Yeah, alienation and harassment,
Mhm.
and truly dangerous. In some, and I feel the kids are so incredibly vulnerable to it because, they're much more sensitive to outside. I mean, all teenagers think the spotlight is always upon them, and everybody is. I find myself doing that every once in a while. While we were touring Japan recently, just came back, and every day we were seeing new people. And at one point, I thought, "Who cares how my hair looks?" I mean, I'm
Right.
still 15, going,
Right.
hey, I can't go out without lipstick and I thought nobody cares. But
Right.
when you're a teenager, you're absolutely convinced that, there's a focus on you. And it's a long time losing that, I think, when you grow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Tin Men, we can't say much more about it. I mean, so for you readers, the questions are going to be, what's going on? Are we at singularity? Do we have a human agent? If we do, what could possibly be the end game of a human agent? So I think there's some really profound questions that you raise, and some of them you're never going to answer. Some of them you've raised for readers, and while there is a solution in the story as to what happened, some of the questions that are raised really there is no answer to them.
Right. I wanted this to be a book with an eye to the future. It's not a science fiction book, even though I don't think what I wrote about is literally happening right now. It could any year now, but really it's about we're at the cusp of something, we're at the beginning of something, and what are we going to do about it?
And are we ever going to, once we launch it, are we going to be able to control it? I mean, it's really sort of, Space Odyssey 2001, Space Odyssey, here we are, 2025. It's interesting how prescient that movie was.
Oh yeah, incredible.
I know at the
And
time it seemed so completely off the wall. I was like, no, that could never happen. And now, you know,
yeah,
now you have to think, okay, maybe. Anyway, what is your plan, Alex? Are you thinking of writing more books in this series, more books of your own?
I have a standalone thriller proposal that's out there in the world, and hopefully can announce something about it soon. It will be. I don't want to say too much about it now, but it will be a thriller. It'll get into some of this speculative issues adjacent to science, similar to the Tin Man and Bloodlines. So I'm
But
excited about that. This series, I would be happy to continue it if somebody's interested. I really, over the course of 3 books, have fallen in love with these characters, especially this book. Having written so much of it by myself, like I do really feel like I internalized, in addition to my father's voice, the voices of got Brodie and Maggie Taylor, and I'm get the two of them just can start talking in my head, and it's a lot of fun. So I would definitely revisit them.
well, I really like them too. What Alex is basically saying is that publishers get to decide whether they want to.
Right?
I'm assuming this was the end of a contract.
It
They
was,
get to
yes.
decide whether they want to continue it, and if they don't, does somebody else want to continue it? And I think readers are sometimes really frustrated when something they like um, goes away. And it's also true with television series. I'm always hearing, why did Bosch have to come to an end? Well, there are a bunch of reasons, but most of them are financial.
Right.
Sometimes it's the actor doesn't want to continue and all, but it's hard for readers who have bonded with something, to envision that something as crass as
Yeah.
commercial success could end
Right.
it.
Of course, because it's an emotional connection that good storytelling evokes in you. On the other hand, sometimes things stick around longer than they should, right? I mean, we've seen that too. Things run out of gas, and I think you have it's both. You have to have both creative and commercial motivation. I think to do these things. I think they both need to be in place. I do think this series could go a lot of places. I mean, these two could be going anywhere in the world, investigating anything. I mean, the army touches all aspects of American society and all aspects of global society ultimately because of the standing of the United States in the world. So it feels to me like it's kind of limitless what I could do with it.
Well, I certainly hope that I'm sure the fact that you're on the New York Times list may have some impact on the possibility of
Let's
writing
let's hope.
future books. Let's hope so. All right, Patrick, come and join us and see if we have any questions or comments from the audience or from you.
Well, Alex has actually answered most of the questions that have come in
Oh, yeah?
the course of the conversation. Let me see here. Um, by the way, Barbara, have you read Mike's book yet? Have you had a chance? The
No, I picked one up yesterday. I
Proving
didn't get
Ground?
an advanced reading copy, so I have a number of books I have to read for November, but my Thanksgiving treat to me is The Proving Ground.
Yeah, it has to do with just what you guys are talking about, with AI and um, these different avatars. In this one, this teenage boy becomes falls in love with an online avatar, this female that's cooked up by a corporation. Um, and the avatar tells him to go, it's okay to kill his ex-girlfriend. And so that's what the legal case is about.
Hmm,
And yeah, fascinating stuff.
Well,
interesting.
thrillers are supposed to, many thrillers anyway, stay on the cutting edge of, social change and what's going on. So I expect we're going to see a lot more stories that are in dealing with, singularity versus human action. And I mean, the Jesse Kellerman book that we talked about the other day, there's a big part of it is this lonely and socially isolated guy acquires I'm trying to remember whether it's a chat box thing or an actual sex doll that talks, but whatever. But that's the only real contact he has, is talking to this machine, and therefore the machine can shape his behavior.
Right.
And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, there's some really big moral questions um, in that.
Definitely. Let's see. What research was involved for this novel is a question that's come in.
Mhm. Um, on the AI robotics end of things, it was mostly just reading. I read this book called Army of None by, I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a very interesting book about a guy who's spent a lot of his career dealing with autonomous weapon systems. Some of this predating what we would call AI. Um, so in that, really learning a lot about the relationship between autonomy, intelligence, and lethality. The Scott Brodie and the Tin Men quips. My Roomba is autonomous, but it's only lethal to dust bunnies. It's like the autonomy doesn't really matter if it can't hurt anybody or can't do anything other than vacuum your floor. And so it's when all these kind of forces come together. Um, and also, when and how do you remove a human from the loop? We don't really, as far as we know, that doesn't exist yet. We have predator drones, but there's somebody in a room somewhere in Wyoming who pushes a button that fires that missile. But at what point will that change? So a lot of these questions that I was researching, they were very interesting. As far as the setting, um, of Camp Hayden, which is a fictional place. I had the opportunity to go to the Army's National Training Center. I posted about this on social media for anybody who saw. Fort Irwin. It's the National Training Center. That means every unit in the U.S. Army at some point rotates in to fight these war games at this vast uh, army installation. They have as much land out there in the in the Mojave as Rhode Island. It's the size of Rhode Island, and they have multiple kind of mock cities and mock towns. And these units come in and they have to bring their own tanks and their own planes and their own logistics as if they're like invading a country. And they do this 2 week massive game. Anyway, they bring they bring people from LA out in Blackhawks to kind of spend the day with the soldiers and get to see the guns and all this stuff. And it was interesting. I got to meet. I live in Brooklyn. I'm out there in the middle of the desert, and I'm having lunch with a private. He's 18 years old, and I asked him where he's from. He said, "I'm from Brooklyn." He never left Brooklyn until now. He's in the middle of the desert. So there was some interesting interactions I had, and also I was flying into the base with this uh, colonel who was in the helicopter, and we were looking out at the desert as we're flying. and he's been there many times, engaging in these war games throughout his career. And he says, "I remember every place I've died." He's fought these mock battles so many times, and so I can tell you every place that I died. I can tell you which hill, and I can tell you why. Why I ended up getting shot. What did I do wrong? And that line of his found became kind of this anchor for some of the themes of the book about the almost the trauma of, it's almost like Groundhog Day, or Edge of Tomorrow, that Tom Cruise Emily Blunt movie, where you're fighting the same war, you're living the same day over and over again, and you just can't get it right. And I found that very interesting, vis-a-vis humans versus robots, kind of forcing humans to act like robots and what that does to the humans, and all these kind of questions that came up. So sometimes it was the unexpected, thrown away line from somebody I was talking to, or just, the way the desert looked, and the sunrise, and these kinds of things that gave a lot of good, um, just inspiration for the book.
Here's a very serious question that's come in, which is, yeah, what does your cat think about your Roomba?
We I think my apartment is too cluttered for a Roomba to do much good right now. So I think we do have one in the back of a closet somewhere. But the cat has a lot of thoughts about the vacuum. The cat knows what the vacuum looks like. It doesn't even make a sound. It will run away in terror. So we're dealing with that. Yeah.
We did see the black tail curling
Yeah, I'm
around
surprised that
behind
he's
you.
not been more annoying. Part of the reason I didn't come out here at first was he's usually really just all up in my business, but I guess he got the message.
We
What's
we
his
had
what's
done
his
we had
name?
done Zooms with cats before, believe me,
Oh yeah.
and also dogs. So it would have been fine. But I'm glad you moved because your connection where you are
Good,
has
good.
been fine.
Yeah, yeah. His name, so my 7-year-old daughter named him Sewer Baby. And that was she was really fascinated with the sewer and loved the sewer. So this was like an honor to be named this, and it just stuck.
Super baby.
Yeah.
Love
That's
it.
great.
That is great. Absolutely true. Anything else, Patrick?
Let's see. No, not really. Do you plan on
Patrick's
writing more
looking at
books in the
both
series?
Facebook and YouTube, so that's
Yeah, I'm
why.
trying to go back and forth. A lot of really nice comments, Alex, but I think you've addressed all the issues that people are bringing up.
Okay,
Excellent. All right. Well,
great.
I'm going to repeat one more time. We have about a dozen unclaimed copies of our second batch of books that Alex is kind enough to sign. So if you want one, it'd be a really good idea to put your name in right now before we run out. So, Alex, it's really a pleasure. Congratulations again on making the Times list. Um,
Thank you.
it really is difficult right now for books that are lacking dragons and sex, but not sex with dragons, is sort of
Well, maybe somebody's gonna. I don't.
I
Who knows? I
know.
don't. I don't read them, so I don't know what's going on over
Or
there. But
girls is nice, or we are really it's really interesting, I think, as a reflection of how people are feeling about the world,
hmm
what is selling. And
yeah.
the fact that it is so heavily fantasy, that it is so heavily heroes battling to restore reason and order in kingdoms under siege. I think it is
Mhm.
a terrific reflection of how we're feeling about the world, and has really no reflection on you as an author or other thriller writers. Uh,
No, I agree. I think it's interesting. I also think it's great. Like I love. I don't read a lot of fantasy, but I do really like and respect the genre, and I think it's great that it's having this time right now.
It's having yeah, it really is. And, conversely, horror is kind of an opposite pole, has had
hmm
a real surge. So, on the one hand, we have, the romance and the fantasy and the positive, and over here we have the awful things that happen. And then sort of in the middle are people reading Cozy Escape,
Right.
where
Right.
people running chocolate shops are actually solving mysteries with the help of their cat.
Right.
And, and those are fun too, but those are
hmm
also comfort reading. So, the thriller that, several years ago truly dominated, I think, um, is just not quite right for the moment. Um,
hmm
so, it's fascinating to watch it. So it's a real achievement for you to have managed to get that high with this book. So congratulations. Anyway,
Thank you very much.
thanks everybody for watching. It's really been a
Thank
pleasure.
you, everybody, for being here. Barbara, it was great to talk to you, and Patrick, thank you.
That's
And
always great. And thank you for signing a new batch of books. And we'll look forward
absolutely,
to talking to you, whatever it is you happen to write next.
that sounds great. Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
Good
All
night,
right.
everybody.
Good night.